Thanks for tuning in. I'm Andrea Zopp, and this is Chicago Newsroom 2.0. On the roundtable this week, we'll discuss the state's new $53 billion budget, the looming fiscal cliff for CTA and PACE, and the latest challenges faced by immigrant communities. I'll also sit one-on-one with the leaders of two incredible organizations improving the lives of Chicagoans, Project OneTen Executive Director Dirrick Butler and Sunshine Gospel Ministry CEO Kimberly Salley. But first, on the other side of a short break, I'm joined by the Lieutenant Governor of Illinois, Juliana Stratton, discussing the state's birth equity initiative and her recent entry into the race to replace Senator Dick Durbin. Stay with us. Tonight, we're joined by a leader who has spent her career centering equity, justice, and the well-being of families across Illinois. As our state's Lieutenant Governor, Juliana Stratton has been a driving force behind transformative initiatives aimed at closing long-standing disparities, none more urgent than those in maternal and infant health. She's here to discuss the Illinois Birth Equity Initiative, a statewide effort launched under the Pritzker administration to combat the alarming racial gaps in birth outcomes and ensure that every mother, baby, and family has access to the support they deserve. But as she continues to advocate for life-saving change, she's also stepping into a new chapter, launching a campaign to succeed U.S. Senator Dick Durbin, who recently announced he will not seek re-election. What does this moment mean for the future of Illinois? How does her work on birth equity inform her vision for the Senate? And what role can Illinois play in advancing national conversations about health, justice, and leadership? Let's hear from the leader herself, Lieutenant Governor Juliana Stratton. Welcome to the newsroom. It's so good to see you.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for being here. Let's start with the Birth Equity Initiative. I know it's important to you and important to the governor, so tell us a little bit about it.
Sure. Well, what I would say is that, first of all, the Illinois Department of Public Health a couple of years ago released a report that showed that Black women here in the state of Illinois are 3 times more likely to die from pregnancy-related complications than their white counterparts. This is not just an Illinois issue, this is a national issue. But what I'm proud of is that Illinois did something about it. Because here's the thing, about 91% of those deaths are preventable. And so a couple of years ago, I convened a group of Black women doulas and midwives and said, look, you're on the ground. You're doing this work every day with women. What do we need to be thinking about as a state? And we had a couple of different meetings. I brought in some of the leaders of our agencies. The governor started having some meetings with his team. And ultimately, I ended up helping to lead the Birth Equity Initiative work, which led us to pass some really nation-leading legislation to make sure that women can have a healthy pregnancy, delivery, and 1 year postpartum. Because a lot of people think those deaths happen in the delivery room, but women often die 1 year postpartum. And so when you hear the term reproductive justice, which was really coined right here in the city of Chicago, this is an example of what it means, that whole access to the whole spectrum of reproductive care so that they can have healthy deliveries, healthy babies, and get on with their lives in the healthiest way.
Wow. So there were just a couple things in there that I want to unpack. First of all, you talked about the mortality rate. At 3 times, for women of color in particular, 3 times more than non-white women. What leads to that? What are some of the factors that you've been addressing?
Well, I think if we look at the system, the healthcare system as a whole, first of all, there are too many maternal care deserts. And we see that too often, not just in urban areas, but as we look at the state of Illinois, rural communities are also experiencing healthcare deserts where there just is not enough care, not enough hospitals, not enough providers, and we really have to focus on how to expand access to care. And one of the ways that we can do that is through access to doulas and midwives and others who can help people have a safe delivery. But I think the other thing is that when you look at both implicit and explicit biases within our healthcare system, there are so many stories. I mean, for me as a Black woman, I have my own stories about engaging with the healthcare system. I have 4 daughters, and my adult daughters have talked about how they and their friends have talked about, is this something I even want to do because I'm worried, am I going to survive pregnancy? Wow. That should not be the case. No. And so I think that there are just so many who don't feel that they can trust a system that, at least in their minds, they feel was not meant for them in the first place.
Yeah. Was it Serena Williams who recently had an issue with a delivery and said, she was having real problems and people were ignoring her and they had to take extra steps, her family to take extra steps to make care, which is like kind of incredible. If you're not going to listen to Serena Williams,
and I think Beyonce had the same kind of stories. There are so many, even celebrities who have talked about it. And the reason why I raise that is people think that maybe this is only something that impacts a certain economic status. It is across the board. Right. Black women are impacted, and we needed to do something about it. Here in Illinois, we did.
Right. Well, the other thing that you said that was a little shocking to me was that it's not just, you said, people think it's just during delivery, right? And you said, no, it's that whole year after. Talk a little bit about that. Is that health issues? Is that postpartum depression? Is it all of the above?
All of the above. And sometimes, quite frankly, Andy, it's people not having the resources that they need. Mm-hmm. So let's talk a little bit about what the Birth Equity Initiative does. Mm-hmm. I mean, we are bringing parity to those who are covered by Medicaid and those covered by private insurance. No matter what you're covered by, you can have access to doulas, midwives, reproductive care. You can have access to lactation consultants. All of that will be paid without a copay, no matter what kind of insurance you have. Wow. We're including access to home visits, 1 year postpartum. So up to 1 year, someone coming in to check on your mental and physical health. We have a diaper need initiative because people don't realize that 50% of American families can't afford clean diapers. And so we put $1 million to making sure that what happens if we give people some diapers to help them care for their children. And that's important because if you think about child care facilities, oftentimes they'll say, bring your baby, but bring 2 weeks worth of diapers. Right. And if you can't afford them, what do you do? Right. And we're going to do $4 million towards a full birth, sort of a maternal mortality plan through the Department of Public Health. And we're putting $1 million into an actual facility on the south side of Chicago, the Southside Birth Center, which is going to help address that maternal healthcare desert issue.
Oh, that's going to be incredible. Mm-hmm. Wow. And how do women access these benefits that you've talked about? If I'm pregnant and I'm interested and I want to make sure that I have access to health care during my pregnancy and after, how do I engage in getting some of these benefits?
Well, I think part of it is we have to do more education, and we're doing that as a state. I mean, when I was having children, I did not know about a doula or a midwife, or I thought that the traditional sort of system was the only way to go. And what a doula and a midwife does, they can be a part of a traditional hospital setting, but they're like your advocate. There's someone to walk alongside you through that process. And so I think we need to educate more in our communities about what a doula and a midwife is and what they can do and how they can really support a healthy birthing process. But overall, these are covered by insurance. So these are benefits that the insurance company,
whether Medicaid or your
absolutely
other insurance will cover.
Should be covered, and they should be making sure that patients understand that that's available.
Right. Wow. Well, it's so important and really matters. And the other thing is that when you're doing that, it ultimately reduces healthcare costs, right? Because you have healthy mothers, healthy babies, and it just makes so much sense. So thank you.
And it saves lives.
Yes, right.
And that's what we want to see here in Illinois. And I'm really just proud of the work that we've been able to get done. And I want to acknowledge Senator LaKeisha Collins and Leader Robin Gable from the House and Senate that really did some incredible work in the General Assembly to help us get this over over the hump.
Right, two terrific state leaders, elected officials. So let's talk about the kind of next phase, next step on your journey. You announced that you're going to run that you are running. You are you're running to succeed Senator Durbin. How did you come to that decision?
Well, I mean, look, we're seeing Donald Trump and Republicans in Washington that are leading us right into a 5-alarm fire. And I think that throughout my journey as an elected official, I've always found these moments where it's not just a sort of, this is what I've always planned to do. It's more so about I am seeing something happening where it requires courage and it requires stepping in and doing something. And 10 years ago, I ran for state representative because I saw healthcare being stripped away. And here we are a decade later, and what's happening in Washington? Healthcare is being stripped away. And so, I woke up to my youngest daughter in tears after the last election. And what I knew is that she deserved to inherit a world that where she could grow up and have the things that she needed. And she didn't have to be fearful of the leaders in place, and that she felt like, government was really working for her. And that's what I'm trying to do. Make sure that, just as I have done here in Illinois, that government can work for the people of Illinois, even in Washington, D.C. And that's the kind of leader that I hope to be.
Wow. Well, that's exciting. A lot of people would see what's going on in Washington and go, absolutely not, go in the other direction. So let's talk, you, as I said in the introduction, you have focused a lot on equity and justice, and those concepts are under attack in Washington. So how does your work and how you think about those concepts inform how you're talking about running and what you hope to do as a senator?
Well, I think in a couple of ways. I mean, first of all, my background is not just as a lawyer, but as a mediator. I did mediation and arbitration for a couple of decades early in my career. And mediation is all about bringing people together and solving problems. And so that's the kind of skill set that I have brought to my role as a public servant. When it comes to those particular issues, when we talk about equity, I mean, think about it. In Washington, D.C. right now, they're stripping away health care. We are expanding healthcare here in Illinois. That's what the Pritzker-Stratton administration has done. Not just the Birth Equity Initiative, but we are getting rid of the middleman in terms of pharmacy benefits to make prescription drugs more affordable. We are eliminating medical debt. That's what real progress is. Raising the minimum wage. The minimum wage is still $7.25 at the federal level. It was $8.25 here in Illinois when we took office. We have now raised the minimum wage to $15 an hour. So when I think about equity issues, what I more so think about is the everyday issues that families are dealing with. We need to make life more affordable for our families. We need to defend their rights. And we need to make sure that we are creating access to opportunity for every young person and every family, and make sure that whether they want to start a business, go to school, or whatever they want to do, that there's a real pathway to do that. We have accomplished those things here in Illinois. And so I want to bring that same leadership to D.C.
So, Illinois, you've run statewide, you understand the differences. I think people who haven't spent any time downstate don't completely understand kind of somehow the differences in perspectives between downstate and the Chicago area. How do you think that experience will help you not only in communicating with the people downstate and those voters you have to get, but also working in Washington, where one of the big issues is that it's like two ships in the night. They don't seem to know how to be able to talk to each other.
Well, first of all, I've represented for the last 6.5 years the entire state of Illinois. And I remember when we first started running with Governor Pritzker and I would head downstate. Then it was just JB and Juliana, and we would go downstate. And people would say, I know you're here for the campaign, you're never coming back. But we have gone back time and time again. In fact, I lead rural affairs for our administration. And so I spend a lot of time downstate. You're right, it is very different. I mean, most of Illinois is not like the city of Chicago. But here's what I know. I often talk about, people use the term the urban-rural divide. I've started using the term the urban-rural bridge because there are issues that are happening downstate that are the same issues that we see on the south and west sides of Chicago, whether that is food insecurity or healthcare deserts, like I've mentioned before with birth equity, whether it is an issue of, broadband internet access and so much more. And so what I try to do using my mediation background is say, how do we come together and find ways to build coalitions? How can we build the kind of coalitions that would say we're stronger together? And I know people want us, and we have an administration in Washington right now that is just singularly focused on pitting us against each other. I think this is a time that people are looking for someone who's going to bring us together, allow us to work together, and solve problems to lift up the middle-class families of Illinois. And that's what I'm looking to do.
Wow. Well, I happen to know that you've chosen a challenging path.
Yes.
But you seem excited and energized about it, and how wonderful that is that we have someone with your experience and talent and commitment and heart, because it does take a big heart.
Yes.
I hate to tell you, and it's hard for me to say, but we are out of time. So, but I want to thank you so much for coming here. Thank you for your work on health equity. It's so, and birth health equity, it's so important. And I really appreciate you, and hang in there on that campaign trail.
Thank you, and thank you for having me, Andy.
Thanks for coming. On the other side of the break, I'm joined by our roundtable panel to discuss the state's new budget and the continued challenges faced by our immigrant communities, courtesy of the Trump administration. Stay with us.
Hi, I'm Dr. Candace Norcott. On the next edition of Be Well, Katrina McGee joins me to explore the emotional side of career pivots. How do you know when it's time to move on? And most importantly, how do you make a change that supports your mental health and well-being? Join the conversation on CAN TV, Cable Channel 19, or stream live on cantv.org or on the CAN TV Plus app. Elevated conversation and storytelling. Experience the power of community television.
This week at the Roundtable, we'll take a closer look at 3 urgent and interlocking stories shaping the future of our city and state. First, the newly approved 2026 Illinois state budget, a $53.1 billion plan that's being called both ambitious and contentious. Then we'll turn our attention to Chicago Public Schools, where leadership uncertainty and financial strain continue to collide. And finally, we'll shine a light on a growing concern across Chicago neighborhoods, the increased presence and activity of ICE agents, reportedly detaining immigrants near court buildings and DHS offices. Is this a shift in enforcement strategy, and how is the city responding to protect due process and its sanctuary commitments? Joining me to unpack it all, Roundtable regulars Juatise Gathings, co-founder Just Act Partners, and Block Club Chicago reporter Francia Garcia Hernandez, along with first-time newsroom guests Reema Amin, reporter with Chalkbeat, and communications consultant Katrina Waddy. Ladies, welcome, and let's get going. We're going to start with the budget. So this budget, one of the things that took them a little bit to get it. It was like touch and go there for a minute, but not quite as bad as the last time. But has over $1 billion in new expanded taxes on and levies on sports betting, nicotine products, out-of-state business income, a whole bunch of ways. The revenue issues were a big issue. So, but Governor Pritzker said he was kind of opposed to broad-based taxes. So is this aligning with the fiscal strategy? Are we good with these, where the budget's finding revenue and we think we're in a good place? I know who's been following it most. Somebody want to?
I've been following it a little bit.
Yeah.
And when you think about like his positioning or stance around not wanting to tax the masses, I think that his budget hits the mark on that. I mean, you think about nicotine and sports betting, where it impacts a group of people. It's not the vast majority, and I do think that there's commonality. So if you have a couple of those habits or things that you're into, maybe you'll feel a little bit more than others. But I do think that attacking high margin areas like sports betting, for example, FanDuel released a statement today saying the impact for them was going to be 50 cents per bet, which is sizable. When you have thousands and millions of bets coming in, so the impact to them is far more minimal to those consumers, but maybe nicotine's a little bit more impacted. But I do think that it hits the mark on his commitment to not tax all.
But 107 million for education, but definitely the smallest increase ever. Is this the time to get incremental on education, or is this kind of what we had to do? Francia, what do you think?
I think it's something that we knew would happen. The state has, like you said, a major revenue problem. It also has a spending problem. So this was going to be a tough budget. There is like the state formula for calculating the increases, but I think legislators just kind of had to make some cuts here and there and maybe not give as big increases as they could in the times of COVID or when they were getting more federal funding, and that wasn't a threat.
Right.
I think also what's apparent and what kind of advocates and district leaders have been saying for a while is that even though the state committed to putting in at least $350 million in increases, that they were never really going to reach that 2027 goal that they had set for themselves. And I think those same advocates and educators kind of view this moment as like, well, this just sets us back a little bit more. So it'll be interesting to see what happens next year.
Right, but I think the challenge is, and all of us, I think, up here care deeply about education. The challenge is we stay behind. We don't have, we undereducate our kids, right? And that's, I get it, you got to find the money from somewhere, but it's hard, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And we're going to circle back to CPS a minute, but I first want to get to transit because there was a little bit of an infusion for transit, but they definitely didn't deal with the issue. So what do you think that's going to mean? It's for, there are cutbacks on services, or I think they're agreeing on, ultimately a structure to restructure how the public transit system works, but they haven't figured out how to fund it.
Chicago traffic is the worst. I feel like a little old lady, like, oh my God, it's taking me 40 minutes to get south, but Chicago traffic is horrible. So I think what we're seeing is that more folks are saying, I'm not taking the train. Maybe for short jaunts, but I don't know how much, how many folks are saying I'm gonna feel safe and comfortable enough to get on the train or want to deal with public transportation issues, maybe Metro, but I think unfortunately for CTA, it's a great transit system, but I just don't know how many folks are gonna say, I'm gonna go back to the trains. I'm just gonna drive in now and deal with the parking situation and all that, so.
Reema, we think that they're going to come back and deal with the transit cliff, the funding cliff for the transit sometime later this year, veto session?
Yeah, I don't have enough insider knowledge to know for sure, but I would hope that they would do it. I think that it's a major issue. I rely on public transit. I don't have a car. Many people in Chicago do, and I think there's just a lot of things at stake. There's the jobs of the people who run the transit system, the people who do have to rely on it, and so I think there's a lot of pressure for them to come back and deal with it for sure.
Yeah, when I used to run the city's economic development organization, and one of the things I always used to pitch was, we have a great transit system, you can get around. So, I think what's the cost to the city and the state if we don't get this fixed? Juatise, what do you think?
I think the cost is high, and it's almost like a catch-22. You have where there is some investment happening in transit. Metro's extending far south. You got the Red Line, extending. So those are all favorable news, especially when it comes down to accessibilities for neighborhoods who don't have accessibility as much to public transit. Like, those are huge wins. But I do think that the transit system has some large challenges, and frankly, I do think that it's very restrictive, and unfortunately, folks who lived in marginalized communities are impacted the most, right? That's where you see the complaints around ghost buses and things along those lines. And so I'm curious to know, if you're going to have this constraint on funding regarding it, how do you ensure that there's equity across the platform, so not all communities, have a disparate impact of it, but it's more equitable across the system?
Yeah. Francia, are you hearing, do you think the mayor's finally got the right team at CTA, that there are people feeling better about the service?
Well, I think, the search for a new leader for the CTA continues, and there were talks that it could maybe be someone from his staff, but that's not happening. So I'm not sure if we know the answer to that question, but what I know is advocates have warned that, this could lead to cuts up to like 50% of the current transit services, as we were already dealing with some, shortages and some areas that don't have great public transit access, or parts of the city like the far south side or the west side that don't have a lot of options. They are limited to just one line or one bus in some cases. So it's going to be a tough impact for some people in our neighborhoods.
So let's hope that and there are a lot of really great minds in the legislature working hard on this issue. Let's hope they figure out a path. Let's move on to another troubled civic organization. And Reema, I know you do a lot of writing on CPS. So I know here they're interviewing for an interim CEO. Who would want that job? I'm trying to figure it out.
Well, as of a couple of weeks ago, there were 5 people in the running, and it's essentially been whittled down to 3 people, 2 people who are currently inside of CPS, higher up, and then 1 person from the mayor's office who started her career at City Hall under former Mayor Lightfoot. And so tomorrow, actually, the Board of Education, they have a meeting every month to review their agenda, but they can also vote at that meeting. And so it's expected that they will choose the interim tomorrow. It's expected to be a long meeting. So
you don't think all 21 of them actually agree on something?
I don't think that this is going to be one of those situations. I think it's going to be another split vote.
Wow.
Yeah.
It should be interesting. It'll be good information for how they actually pick a new CEO, right? Because it's a very different day than what it has been prior to this.
Definitely. I mean, you have a half-elected board. Right. You have new challenges that the district is facing. It hasn't faced financial challenges in a handful of years. And so there's a lot of new issues to deal with. It'll be very interesting not only to see what happens tomorrow, but how they continue this search for the permanent replacement for the current outgoing CEO, Pedro Martinez.
Yeah. So speaking of financial challenges, so the CEO, Superintendent Martinez issued his new budget, has a couple issues with it. The first being that there's money in there that hasn't come yet, or it hasn't been authorized or appropriated. And the other is that it pulls steps back on some of the things that they promised in the CTU contract. Francia, have you had a chance to give some thought to that, or how that's going to float in communities?
Not really. I haven't heard that much from advocates, but I know it is always a source of worry for many advocates, for many families, and for many students. This is not new, as funding has been an issue for CPS schools, and we know some schools get less funding. Some schools have gotten more new students, bilingual students, as Reema has reported in the past. So this could be a concern. I just haven't heard of it yet.
Juatise, what happens if they're based on they have funding in there, but it doesn't come? How do you build a budget on magic money?
I mean, coming from the business world, I think we're cooked. It doesn't work that way. And I also think that there's, great cause to concern about that, and creating processes of transparency to understand if that funding doesn't come, what are the trade-offs that have to be made. I also think CTU has, every right to be concerned in this instance, because it weakens the power of the negotiation table. If you commit to do something, you got to figure out how to make those things happen, or be willing to go back to the parties and have conversations about, why it can't happen. So I think, I could expect there to be, stronger negotiations going forward, but also this idea around equitable negotiations too. How do you do what you say you're going to do? And so I get it. Pedro is in a very, very tough position. I do not envy him trying to balance that budget. But the reality of it is, I think there's a lot of constituents, including parents and students, who are curious about transparency, down to how they're going to elect the interim and the permanent CEO, to how they're going to balance the budget. And I think that's things that are still yet to be determined, where they need to, instead of allowing the political drama, I would say, to play out in the media, how do we create transparent processes for people to understand what is the journey and how do we get across it?
But isn't that what those meetings were for? You know, all these town hall meetings and community meetings, and the community has a voice into, you know, what some of the qualifications should be for the new CEO. Like I like to report out on that, because that, you know, kind of makes folks think that you're just doing. I'm a PR person, but just the good old PR stuff where it's like, I know, but what was the follow up on that? So if you heard from the community,
it'd be interesting to see if they actually say, when they pick the interim tomorrow, if they'll say, you know, based on what we heard from the community. Somehow I think that's not going to happen, but it would be great. Now, Reema, on the split with CTU, he says there's only so much I can do, but you're going to get your money, but might not be able to reduce class sizes right now. I might not be able to get you nurses in every school. Is that fair? Or should he have not agreed to it in the first place?
So based on reporting from some of my colleagues and a letter that the CTU sent, this was one of potential numerous scenarios that the district is playing around with to close their budget. As you said, there's also this concept of magic money. The district thinks that it's going to get $300 million additional dollars from somewhere that is unlikely to materialize. And so they're presenting these scenarios. And, as you said, I think the union is in a position where they're saying, you made a contractual agreement with us, and we understand that you're in a tough financial situation. Sorry, you can't take it out on us. And I think, I'm not a legal expert, but I think I would guess you could argue breach of contract there if the district goes through with that. But just as an observer, it feels like the district is pushing around different scenarios, presenting them to board members. And the union is kind of like, you're going to have to fight us on that. So and amazingly, their fiscal year starts July 1st, and we do not know how this budget is going to play out.
Right. Of course, Pedro Martinez will be like, well, I'm leaving. Good luck, interim CEO, whoever you shall be, right? And I think the hard part, is for me is that it really impacts parents and students, right? I mean, how does that? But as a Chicago resident, how do you feel about that?
I mean, having raised my daughters, I mean, on one end I say, phew, at least my kids are already out of school, they're already college graduates. But to thinking about when they were at Skinner and at Brooks, those are selective enrollment schools, and so Chicago has so many issues with equitable resources and things like that at schools, so that you're driving from one side of town to another side of town because your kid got accepted in that selective enrollment school. And so, I mean, this is it. There's some folks, almost to use your term, and sometimes some folks it's like you're already cooked. I mean, like your school, you're in a neighborhood with bad resources or lack of resources. Your school is already suffering, whatever. So I think some folks would feel like, just forget it. I mean, what do I have here? So I think it'll put folks in a little bit more of a desperate mode, and so you might even need to look at having different types of services in schools too, to quell the frustrations and fears and anxiety of students and parents and folks that are in the schools and feel like we don't have anything.
Right. Well, let's hope that we'll see how the new board does when they're identifying a new interim CEO, and that'll hopefully give us some ideas if they can come together to solve tough issues. So, and we'll keep our fingers crossed for our kids, because that's really ultimately here what matters. But speaking of tough, really frustrating and annoying issues, what's going on with ICE? What's happening? What are they doing?
Well, as I'm sure many people have seen, there have been detentions happening nationwide. Here in Chicago, we have seen reports of ICE detaining people in the neighborhoods. Just last week, 2 people were detained in Pilsen, a story we covered at Block Club Chicago, but also at least 10 people were detained during a check-in at a monitoring program
the one that was
facility
downtown, right?
in the South Loop, yes. That led to some protesters and some elders clashing with ICE officials. Ultimately, they were able to transport and take the detainees somewhere. And we know it's at least 10 people, but the numbers could be higher. So this is obviously causing fear, anxiety, and uncertainty, because people are showing up to appointments or court following the process of the immigration system, and then they're being detained and potentially being deported.
So what do we think? They ran out of vicious criminal illegal aliens to arrest, and so now they're arresting the people who are actually following the law?
I think it was a part of the design all along. I think that, it's clear that the administration is underperforming on some of its immigration commitments as far as deportations go, but I also think that spaces that should be safe with residents trying to comply with expectations should be off limits. And it's sad, I was with a group of principals, yesterday, and they were planning for, how might they shut down the graduations of their 8th graders if ICE were to show up because they have Latinx parents there and they know they are a school of asylum seekers. That shouldn't be what's top of mind for people who are, managing churches and institutions and courthouses. And I think, we've gone so far from what the majority say they voted for to what the reality is, which I think he's been trying to communicate it to us all along. And, kudos to him for standing on what he said he was going to do.
Right, which is separate families. And detain people who are actually, and half the people are only here illegally because they changed their status last week, right?
Yep.
So, I mean, Reema, are you hearing or seeing, what are you seeing in the stories you're looking at?
Yeah, I mean, just generally speaking, last year we talked to, a number of families who were newcomers, migrants from South and Central American countries trying to seek, adequate, good education for their kids. Those same families are, frankly, afraid to talk to us now because they don't want their names out there. They're also afraid of, more importantly, they're afraid of what comes next, stability, does my kid keep going to school? Do I keep them home? So a lot of those questions on just how to get through day by day.
Right. Well, I hope that the courts will start weighing in here soon, and we can get through and start managing this fear, which I think is really what this is all about, and is really concerning. But unfortunately, we are not going to solve this problem today because we ran out of time again. But I want to thank all of you ladies for being here. I appreciate it as usual, and informed and interesting conversation on some very tough topics. So we've got a lot in front of us. So, but thank you all, and I look forward to having you back soon. So thank you.
Thank you.
Chicago Newsroom 2.0 continues on the other side of a short break. Stay with us.
So on Memorial Day, 1978, an intruder came into our home. There was never a moment where it was black and white for me. It was a bad dude. And unfortunately, people reacted badly. And that's when my mom started to get threatening letters at the Defender and at home saying she was a race traitor. And this is what your family gets.
Joining me now is a leader who is transforming how young men of color are seen, supported, and set up for success. Dirrick Butler is the executive director of Project OneTen, a Chicago-based nonprofit dedicated to helping Black and brown boys not just stay in school, but thrive, graduate, and imagine bold futures for themselves at a time when so much of the national conversation around young men of color is focused on crisis. Project OneTen is focused on opportunity, mentorship, and possibility through direct support, academic guidance, and intentional relationship building. The organization is working to close opportunity gaps and rewrite narrative one student at a time. Dirrick Butler, welcome to the newsroom.
Thank you so much for having me.
Forgot where I was for a minute. So thank you for being here. So first, let's start with, what is Project OneTen? What does the name stand for, and what do you do?
Yeah, so thank you so much for having me. Project OneTen, as you shared, is an organization that supports Black and brown boys during the critical transition from 8th grade to high school. So as a former 9th grade history teacher, I saw my students enter the classroom excited for this new journey of being in high school and all that comes with it, but ultimately saw very quickly that they needed a little bit more support and guidance, as high school carries a lot of weight, not only for those 4 years that you're in the building, but for what your future could look like. So we've been around about 6 years now, and doing some pretty cool things in the city.
Yeah, so what does the name stand for, Project OneTen?
Andy, I have to figure out how to make this a short and sweet answer. But
That's okay. We got a couple minutes. Don't take too long.
Right. So I attended Clark-Atlanta University in HBCU, and Dr. W.E.B. Du Bois was a professor there. And many people know he had this theory, the talented 10th, right? That 10% of Black folks during that time would gain the level of influence and education needed to really shift society, right? So the organization OneTen is really birthed from that, but really adding what I like to say a new kind of spin on it, which is really the service aspect, right? Not only going to school, getting an education and doing amazing things, but how are you intentionally reaching back to support other folks, and in this case, young people reach those same levels of influence in our society.
Oh, that's fantastic. I love that. So what are some of the challenges that the young men that you serve are facing specifically that you're trying to address?
Yeah, definitely. So if you think back to when you were 13, 14, 15, for anyone.
It's like a big hazy thing, right? I think mostly I blocked when I was 13. Like, who wants to really remember that?
It is a challenging, weird, awkward time. So when you think about that experience, but on top of that, what we know to be true in our city for Black and brown boys, it's just an added layer of things to figure out. So we really want to create a space where students are able to figure out their identity. Who is it that they want to be, right? At 13, 14, 15, you begin to kind of move away from talking with your parents about things, and you really look for that external validation. So our work is around putting positive peers, positive adults around students so that they can figure those things out in a safe environment. Because oftentimes, Black and Latino boys don't really have the opportunity to make mistakes, right? You have to have the decision, figure out what it is, or you're gonna go one or two ways. So we really wanna create that buffer around students so that they can make mistakes in a safe space, and hopefully then go on to do amazing things with this newfound identity, their values intact, and really clear on what it is that they wanna do.
Yeah, so part of what you're talking about in terms of that safe space is mentorship, right?
Exactly.
That's a big part of your program. Why? How do you use it? And where do you find your mentors?
Yeah, definitely. So mentorship is key in our program because it really allows students, as I shared a moment ago, to build a close connection with someone that they can bounce ideas off of, right? I mean, we have students talk to their mentors, everything from how do I advocate for myself in the classroom? This teacher may not like me. I need to figure out how to use my voice, to maybe now interested in dating and I don't know how to go and talk to someone. So, I mean, it spans, right, the spectrum of what our students are talking with their mentors about. But it's very important because this is the age where students kind of don't really talk to their parents, right? A lot of our parents are like, they're not talking to me anymore. I don't know what's going on. They're doing all these things. But we're able to really kind of stand in the gap, if you will, and serve as trusted adults, trusted people to really help guide students. And our mentors are everyday Chicagoans who care about the future of our city, right? We all see on the news every single day how we oftentimes don't talk so great about the young people, right? And specifically young men, So our mentors are people who see that and really are running towards it, right? How do I do something about that?
Right. And is it 8th grade to 9th grade, or how long do the young men do they participate in your programming?
So our program is laser focused on freshman year. So we are a 1-year program. We really want to have targeted programming to support that freshman year because we know, and data shows, that if a student completes their freshman year on track, specifically with a 3.0 GPA, they're 3.5 times more likely to graduate high school in 4 years and lead choice-filled life. So 1 year of intense support.
Right, and then how are you measuring success? Is it that they graduate, that they go on, that they're, that they report being, stable and healthy and well? Yeah.
Yeah, so success in our program, yes, there's the academic components, right? Sure. Like, 3.0 GPA, graduate in 4 years. But I feel like it's the other things that are so important, right? Like, can a student leave our program saying that they have developed a strong relationship with a mentor, that they've built a brotherhood and a community with their peers that they can now keep in contact with beyond just their freshman year? Or even more, right? That they see Chicago as theirs, right? That they now have been exposed to so much more and are able to build their dreams and hopes on something beyond just their community.
So where do your students come from?
Our students are individuals who either live or go to school on the south and west sides of the city. We partner with schools in 11 kind of target community areas, and school counselors refer their students to be a part of our program.
Nice. So it requires money to run your program.
It does.
And so how do you raise money to support? You have maybe an event coming up.
We do, yes. So as all nonprofits, we need money to function, right? And one of the ways that as a young organization, we like to do that is through a fun event, the Summer Soiree. We call it an ungala. It's a gala, but it's not, right? It's a party with a purpose, and it takes place on June 26th at Loft Lucia in the West Loop. And this year we have a very ambitious goal of raising $50,000 to support our ongoing efforts to support students. This upcoming year, we're growing. This year alone, we served 200 students. So next year, we're hoping to top that with our new cohort. We need dollars to do it. So people can definitely purchase tickets at our website. And we would love to have you out.
So what's the website?
Our website is project110.org, all spelled out.
Okay.
It's very easy to purchase tickets for the event.
Okay, well that gives people something to look forward to.
Yes.
So tell us one, like your favorite story coming out of Project 110.
Yeah. When I think about like the impact of our work, I often think of this one story. It was one of our students. His grandmother passed away. And as someone who has a very close relationship with my grandmother, that really touched home for me. But as most young people, they don't really know what to do with all those feelings, especially at 13, right? So he began to cope in ways that may not have been as positive or productive, but his mentor was able to be there for him. And he talked about at the end of the program that he realized that was not who he wanted to be. And he realized that he needed to engage in more positive activities, like being in the program at Project 110, engaging with his mentor. And for me, I think that just showcases like the impact of our work, that we're there to listen and not judge and really support young people get on that right path when major traumatic experiences happen.
Right.
Yeah.
Wow, that is powerful.
Yeah,
That's wonderful. Dirrick, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for all the work that you're doing.
I appreciate it.
Good luck with all the young men and what you're doing. And for my viewers, there's still time to get your ticket for Project 110's Summer Soiree fundraising event and support this incredible organization. On the other side of the break, Sunshine Gospel Ministries CEO Kimberly Salley joins me to discuss the critical work her organization is doing to expand access to economic opportunity and equity on the south side of Chicago. Stay with us.
Hi, I'm financial educator Tamara Durbin. On the next episode of In the Money, we'll talk about pathways to building wealth with my guest, real estate investor James Morris, and entrepreneur and attorney Mashawn Studley. Join the conversation exclusively on CAN TV Cable Channel 19 or stream live on cantv.org or on the CAN TV Plus app. Elevated conversation and storytelling, experience the power of community television.
Welcome back, Chicago. Joining me now is a leader whose work is rooted in faith, justice, and community transformation. Kimberly Salley is the CEO of Sunshine Gospel Ministries, a long-standing Chicago-based organization committed to addressing poverty, racial injustice, and systemic inequity, especially in under-resourced neighborhoods on the South Side. Under Kimberly's leadership, Sunshine Gospel Ministries continues to provide critical support to youth and families through programs that promote spiritual development, academic support, job readiness, and restorative justice. As our city grapples with deep-rooted challenges, Kimberly and her team are helping to chart a path forward, one grounded in empowerment, hope, and community-driven solutions. Kimberly, Salley, welcome to the newsroom. So happy to have you.
Happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
So first, tell us, I said a little bit about Sunshine Gospel Ministries, but you tell us a little bit more about what you do.
You did. So I'm excited. Sunshine's excited. We're celebrating 120 years of service in some of Chicago's most under-resourced, underserved communities. We started in 1905 on the near north side of Chicago, serving single moms, and then as men through a mission. And then with the building of public housing with Cabrini Green, we started serving youth and families in Cabrini Green. When the government decided to shut down public housing and families were displaced into different communities throughout the city, Woodlawn was one of them. And so Sunshine Gospel Ministries, we followed some of our families to that community. So we've been in Woodlawn since 2004, for about 21 years, serving the Woodlawn and Washington Park community and other communities within the 20th Ward of the city. And so even though we've had various iterations of ourselves, one thing has remained constant, and that's our mission, that we seek the renewal of the city through ministries and programs of discipleship, mercy, and justice.
Oh, wow. And you work closely with families, right?
We do, with youth and families. And we focus on our pillars of peace, is what we call them, where we recognize that people are our primary focus and wanting to come alongside and respecting their voice and including them in decisions about the resources and the needs of their community. That education is essential. All of our programs have an educational foundation because we want young people especially to respect the intellectual strength that comes from education. Access. Without having access, there's no opportunity. So access is the key to opportunity, and in collaboration. Sunshine can't do it all, but it's important for us to partner with other organizations so that we can holistically meet the needs of families in our communities. And then the E would be empowerment. That's the end game for our families to be empowered.
Right. And part of that empowerment, you do some work in the area of economic empowerment. Is that right? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So one of our core pillars is, one of our core values, is restorative justice. And so in looking at, restorative justice, we kind of use that as a foundation for economic empowerment, right? And helping our families to build generational wealth. So we started a housing equity initiative back in 2001 during COVID, recognizing that while the government was saying to shelter in place and that was a safe place for some, 76% of renters in Woodlawn, 74% of residents in Woodlawn are renters, and about 93% of residents in Washington Park are renters. So families were being evicted when the government said they shouldn't be. And so we just kind of looked at and wanted to do some research around the barriers to home ownership for our families. And so in looking at that, our home equity initiative has two pillars. One is sustainability. So there are residents the ones that were having issues with back taxes and were subject to losing their homes through the tax sale. So we partnered with Cook County Treasurer Maria Pappas's office to help save families that were on that tax sale list from losing their homes. Then we partnered with some of our funders who had been helping with COVID relief to repurpose their dollars to help with down payment assistance for families that wanted to buy homes. And our third piece that we're currently working on that we're really excited about is neighborhood revitalization. So in Woodlawn, there are over 300 vacant homes vacant lots. In Washington Park, there are over 400 vacant lots, which speaks to the disinvestment in our community. And thinking about the indigenous people that live there, they would like to stay there, but they don't have access, opportunity, resources, and means. And in some instances, the education around what it takes, right? So financial literacy and budgeting and things like that. And so we've partnered with some other like-minded community-based organizations throughout Chicago and the mayor's office through an initiative where we are being allocated certain numbers of those lots with support from our alderperson, in our 20th ward is Alderwoman Jeanette Taylor, to start to build new construction and redefine affordable by offering buyer subsidies to the tune of about $100,000 to $150,000 per home. That's where you start to redefine affordable, especially for communities like ours where the average median income is $29,000. And so we currently have investors coming into our community and taking advantage of our assets. And we want to provide a platform where Indigenous people in our community can take advantage of the assets in communities where they've grown up and their families have lived for generations.
And then they're invested in the community, right? Not just with dollars, but with their hearts and their families. And
exactly.
You've talked a couple times about partnering and the importance of partnering and collaboration. Why does that matter so much to the work that you do?
It matters because in our community, like I said, there is a lack of resources. And when you think about the times that we live in right now, as the government is interesting and things are happening, there's going to be there's going to be more of a pull on community-based organizations to fill the gaps and voids that the government is creating, right? And so with that, a lot of us have limited resources, right? And then some of us have those niche things that we're good at, but we're not good at everything, right? And so it's really important to, find allies and those collaborative partnerships so that our families can have a holistic offering of the things they need. So one of the other things that we're excited about is a new initiative, a workforce development program. So we have been hiring young adults from 16 to 24 through the Mayor's One Summer Chicago program. And what we found is those 18 to 25-year-olds at the end of 6 weeks, they need jobs. And what happens if they can't find jobs, right? We also have a violence intervention program, right? And so there's these things we have. And so what are the weights and balances, right? Maybe our crime rates would go down if young people could have the support that they need to be trained and supported in finding viable jobs. And so we've started this initiative and we're excited. We have 12 businesses that are willing to hire our young people ages 18 to 24 if we train them and support them. And so we're building it on an educational platform, a one-year program where we coach and mentor them. And so we had one of our candidates for the position we're hiring for the program, and he called it helping them find ABC jobs, a job, then a better job, and then a career.
Oh, wow.
And so we're excited about being able to provide that. And we can't employ them all, right? So the importance of, collaboration and being able to provide access and opportunity.
That's super powerful, and will not only help change their lives, but help them change other lives.
Yep, and the generation to follow.
So, and you're working also on a community center, right? The Sunshine Community Center. Tell me a little bit about that.
Wow. So that's been a 3-year process thus far. In 2014, the community asked Sunshine Gospel Ministries if they would consider helping to build a community center. And that was before my time. But from what I understand, a feasibility study was done, and it was not financially feasible at that time. About 3 years ago, we got information from a government official that there was $13.5 million in the budget for a community center in our community. Was Sunshine interested? And so we did our feasibility study, and
all of a sudden it got a lot more feasible,
It got a lot more feasible, right? And so, we've been, like I said, we've been working on that. To date, we've raised $28.9 million of the $36.9 million. So we are in the midst of a capital campaign where we're looking to raise about $8 to $10 million for the project. We want a $2 million endowment because all of our programs are free, and we want to keep it that way. And we also want to include programming for seniors, which we feel is a missing demographic in our community. And so we're excited. Like I said, the community has spoken into it over the last 3 years. All of the things that we hope that it will bring to the community has spoken into. So everything from, they did ask for a swimming pool, and we said no, we didn't want the liability. But, for example, we were at a community event, and we had some now collaborative partners come up and say, we don't have a roller skating rink in the community anymore. What about some of the things we had growing up that our kids don't have? And they said to me, if you get the right gym floor, it could be used as a roller skating rink. And so in building out the community center, all those kinds of things are being taken into consideration. So There'll be a double gym. We have a consortium of coaches who are looking for places to train their athletes and are tired of going to, suburban areas or, other places. It'll be anchored by a restaurant, cafe. So the community said they want a cafe by day, a restaurant by night. They'd rather not have to go to a neighboring community to have a dining experience. We don't have a heating or cooling center in our community, and so we're looking forward to using our multi-purpose space on the main level for that, and thinking specifically of seniors who now, when the weather's really inclement in the summer, we have CTA buses that'll come out in front of buildings so seniors can come sit on buses and cool.
Well, this is going to be a community center built by and for and with the community.
Yes.
That's awesome.
Yes.
Kimberly, thank you so much for coming and sharing about Sunshine Gospel Ministries. Most importantly, thank you for the work you're doing for the people of your community and for Chicago. So you're making a difference, and that's really wonderful in building community, which is near and dear to my heart. So thank you, and continue good luck.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for coming.
Yes.
And thank you for tuning in Chicago. That's our time for now. Until we meet again, be well and well informed.